This is a dividing point in the road, a Y in the road, okay? Where Christians come down to this Y and reach a point where they realize there is a second decision. I haven't made it yet. I've been following God, best I can and stuff, but I don't know that I've ever consciously told God, I'm all over, I'm all in for you. I'm pushing everything into the pot now for you, God, without reservation. And we have to be very careful with this decision. This is not to be lightly taken, okay? Because God will hear what you say. And He will take you at your word. You might try to change your mind later on. I did. And He was like, no, you already decided. It's a big decision. Anything could happen. You realize that. I struggled with this in my living room of the rooming house I was living in for hours thinking about it. Oh man, what if He wants me to go to Africa and be a missionary? What if I don't get to be with my lover that I love? And so forth. And I just realized, and I was struggling with it, really an intense struggle. It lasted till 4 a.m. In the end, I realized several points. For one thing, I realized it makes sense to give myself over completely to God. It's just, that's what He says right here, right? This is your reasonable act of worship. There's nothing far out about this. There's nothing fanatical about it. It's just obvious. He's God. He's the one we have to deal with. He's the one that loves you. What good reason would there be for not giving yourself over entirely to Him? Now, you know what the answers are. Ego, reserving the right, preserving my right to sin, and to be autonomous, and separate from Him. There's something within us that kind of wants that right if we want. There's an act of trust here. How much do I really trust Him? That's the question. But if He's real, if He is who we've been reading about, then I can trust Him, and that does make sense. It's my reasonable act of worship. It just follows from the truth about who God is that I would give myself entirely over to. I also realized the alternative was disgusting. I tried to imagine, okay, so if I decide not to give myself completely over to God, then what? What am I saying? And I tried to imagine a life. I had already gone too far to pretend like I didn't know what I knew. I knew God was real. At that point, I was thoroughly convinced. I knew He was there. I knew His Spirit was in my life, and I tried to imagine living a life based on self when I knew perfectly well, that God was real and that I had turned away from that option. How, what would fill my life? What? Trying to be important? Trying to, impress people? I'd be so stupid. I could see how shallow that would be. I knew I wouldn't be happy. It's not like I had ever been happy before when I was walking apart from God. It was hardly a handful of days where I was genuinely happy. I knew it wouldn't lead to happiness. And what it would be this kind of hypocritical, half-hearted commitment that I had seen so often, frankly, in other Christians. And I was highly critical of that. Christians who said, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, their lives didn't manifest the presence of, they didn't seem to be for real at all. And I thought that was disgusting. That was a real turnoff for me. And I was now going to become one of those people. I dreaded that picture. I knew I would be just walking around feeling guilty. I wouldn't have the purpose in my life that God gives me. He wouldn't be able to use me very much. Because the people that he really uses are the ones that do this. These are the ones that understand and give themselves over to him. I also realized since then, this has been quite a few years for me now. So in the years since then, one of the things that I maybe kind of realized that night, but not fully, is that all the coolest parts of Christian living and a spiritual life with God are reserved for people who make this move. That in fact, people who are holding back from making this move with God live in a nether gloom. They've gone too far to be of use in the world system, but not far enough to be of use to God. They live in a nether world in between, torn by desires, guilt. Peter says that people who have once seen the truth and turned away from it, he says the last state has become worse than the first. And what he means by that is that there's nothing more miserable than a half-hearted, half-committed Christian. All the time we know I should be fully committed, and we're not. We know that. We're holding out. It ain't right, but we're doing it anyway. And it's just a bad feeling. We try to go out and enjoy the world system. Well, I'm going to party tonight. Can't enjoy it. It's not like it was before. We try to go in and we try to I'm going to enjoy some fellowship with the brothers. Yeah, so I'm going to get in and spend some time with the Lord. Can't really enjoy that either. It's not enjoyable like it should be, because all the time I'm thinking, why do I have to hold out from God? Why am I refusing to follow Him? I don't know. And so you're in a very negative place. On the other hand, people who trust God the rest of the way with their lives, they're the ones who then, and this could lead to suffering. This could easily lead to suffering. There's no promises here. But all of the deep and cool parts of walking with God start to open up, and the potential is there to enter into a very deep walk with the Lord that is rich. You get to be one of His people that He uses, in this world, and that is awesome. That is so exciting. I love that. To this day, I've never gotten tired of it. And you can now draw close to God in a way you could not before. There isn't a tension between you and God. So, it's a decision. It's a decision that people can make if they want to. And this, like I say, it's like a fork in the road. Some Christians decide, I just don't think so. I'm not ready for that. And so they go the other way. I was talking to a brother a while back. His life was doing very poorly. He felt kind of miserable. He'd been hanging around in Christian fellowship for a couple of years. And he just reached a point where, he was like, I'm just not going to follow God anymore. I'm leaving. I'm going to go back to the world. And I was like, well, suit yourself. But I said, the thing is, when you go out there, don't ever tell anyone that you tried Christianity, because you never did. You never crossed over and discovered what the all-out life for Christ really is. And no wonder you feel kind of lousy and goofy, because that's basically the ground that you've chosen to live on, the half-committed ground. Well, so there it is. You have a choice. You could do this right here tonight. It's really not something you gotta. But then again, if people felt like, well, I need to think about this for a while, I could see doing that too. I could see it either way. There it is. He says, I urge you. Well, Paul, he had done this, so definitely. He was one. And he urges them to